Wonderful. If you can hear us, if you can see us, go ahead and make a comment live so we know that you can hear and see us. Welcome to Noble Warrior. My name is CK Lin. This is a place where entrepreneurs talk about what it takes to create and scale purpose-driven organizations. We're going to talk about mindset. We're going to talk about mental models. We're going to talk about actionable tactics such that you can go out and create and scale your purpose-driven organization. Today, I'm really fortunate to have my next guest with us. He was in charge of strategic alignment and continuous excellence for Nestle. He helps organizations build AI capabilities. He is deeply passionate about unlocking human creativity from the smallest scale to the largest scale. Please welcome Eric Horner. Let me do this. Amazing. Welcome, Eric. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, CK. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So one of the things that you share with me is that you love cooking, especially you love cooking with fresh ingredients. Why don't we start there? What is your favorite? Do you have like a go-to recipe that you use?
Yes. So I love cooking. I guess I love cooking because I'm both French and Vietnamese. That's my origin. So I love to cook both Vietnamese food. I learned cooking Vietnamese food with my grandmother when I was a kid. Actually, I was watching her cooking every time we'd go back from school. I would sit down in the kitchen and do my homeworks, and my grandmother would like do this wonderful Vietnamese food. And I'm French also, so origin from Paris. So I love French cooking. A favorite recipe that I love to cook will be actually in French. It's called cheveux d'ange. It's how is it called? Angel hair. So it's a Vietnamese recipe. So you steam basically those very light and thin noodles. So you steam that, and then on the other side you prepare your beef, your beef with your peanuts. You grind the peanuts and your beef, and you take this out in a wok, add some sprouts on it, and then prepare your nuc mam sauce. And the nuc mam is like a fish sauce, and everyone has this own recipe. There's the basic ingredients, but it's all about how you taste it and make it your own.
So let me ask you this. What about it makes you feel so good that that's your favorite particular recipe?
I love to do that actually when I have dinner with friends and family. And the reason why I love this one is because you need to eat with your hands. And what's so good about that is about sharing. So you put this at the center of the table, and I love to do this like with first time people we meet, because you just open all the. There's no more, the formality of eating with a fork and a knife disappear, and the fact that you have to share with your hands creates much more, bonding and the relationship of trust. So I guess that's the reason why this one.
I love that. You are a collaborator in all aspects of your life. One of the things that immediately, because we don't know each other very long, one of the things that touched me immediately is your desire to collaborate, your openness, that's part of who you are, right? So when you think about collaboration, one of the hack is you break bread with someone. That's a way to get right to the source of relatedness, intimacy almost, right?
Yeah.
So when you establish relationship with someone, is there any specific favorite methods to cultivate a relationship with someone from your point of view?
Methods for I guess when you first meet someone, I guess the things I like to do is get to know that person. So really being genuinely interested about this person. I guess that's one of the foundation for me of everything. And from there, you can build a real, a genuine relationship, which is not necessarily a business relationship. And I guess to your point, CK, I like the idea of breaking the bread. This is definitely that's what's so food is so important. Food is actually, we have so many different tastes. Every human has very specific taste, and this is unique. And we know that. That's, if you look at personal nutrition, that's why we can go in very unique tastes. But at the same time, the fact that we eat together is the first part of creating a relationship of trust. So that's why I think food is so centered in our human relationship.
So, as someone who view food as fuel, I'm actually I'm a savant when it comes to the sophistication of some people have with their palate, with their taste. Because to me, food is food, right? It's the point is, so then I don't die. I mean, I hate to phrase it that way, but I do want to learn. I am curious. I do have the desire to learn, right? So teach me, right? So someone who is really passionate, who's a aficionado around food, to someone who view food as just fuel. What are some of the ways that I can do to enrich my life with, to understand food better? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually, it's a good question. I'm in no means, in no way, a food expert. I'm no chef. Just, food is just part of my life. I work in the food industry for a while. I'm still connected to it. But I guess when it comes to food from a personal experience, I guess there's cultural aspects of it. So I guess it's easier to talk about love of food when you're French,
Ah,
that's the that's part of your birthright.
I
When
see.
you
I see.
grow up in France with amazing products, with when you summer vacation is about, you know taking an apero and then taking your kids for lunch, and then you eat in a family setting, and you may spend with friends on family 2-3 hours just sitting and eating and discussing. Okay. So everything is centered around the food that is on the table, and how well it's been prepared, how good the products are. And I guess the the start for everyone who's looking at food as a fuel is to look at the raw products. So
Other
if you
what
look at,
product?
the raw products, like tomato as itself, um, is just to understand and try to get a good tomato from a farmer's market versus the one you're going to have in a grocery store. And just eating that tomato it's all about picking the right ingredients. You can just cut that tomato, put a bit of olive oil, a good one, especially from Spain or Italy, a little bit of good salt, and then just eat that. And not with the idea that you need to fuel, but with the idea to say, how will this tomato taste like? And I guess you will see that the appreciation of food really start with appreciating single ingredients and product as they should be, and not those ingredients that are being functionally cultivated and harvested with not a lot of taste, not a lot of flavors that you have to mix with other enhancer to actually create something else that is more acceptable to your palates. So
Mm, mm, mm. So I think for some people may be thinking this is a strange question. What am I asking specifically around dishes and teach me about taste when we want to talk about sustainable food in a broader system with AI and so forth, right? But the way
mhm.
I think about it is having this relationship, this emotional relationship with the food that we eat is the atomic unit of anything that we want to talk about. If I just view food as fuel, let's say, then I wouldn't care what I put into my system so much. But if I actually do have an emotional relationship with the taste, with the sophistication, with the people that I eat with, then all of a sudden I'll care much more about the cradle to grave, so to speak, about the whole ecosystem because I care so much about this atomic unit. Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah.
landing for you?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's interesting what you're saying, because it's so Yeah, it's so true and applicable in my experience. When there's no um, this atomic connection to what you want to do, how difficult it is actually to get engaged and to really be good and performant at what you're doing. But yeah, absolutely, I agree with this approach.
So looking ahead, I know we're just gonna follow our curiosity, by the way, and by any means, this is a conversation. I don't want to mean to be like a drilling session with you. Okay.
Okay.
Um, so the way I think about sustainable food, was there a singular moment where you start to say to yourself, "Oh, I really care about this. I wanted to do more about it around innovation. I want to educate people about it. I want to use artificial intelligence, these bigger and bigger tools to have bigger and bigger impact on this." Was there like thinking back, was there a moment where a light switch got turned on? This is something I want to dedicate my effort, my life, my career in focusing.
That's a good question. I've been working for a long time for a big company, Nestle. So it's is the biggest food corporation in the world. Um, uh, and what is interesting is that I left the company like 2 years ago, and I guess this was this moment in my life where I was about either to continue with another mission with the company. The company was moving the headquarters from Los Angeles, and I was offered a position in Seattle at the time. And that was this moment in time when I was wondering, shall I just continue there? And Nestle was a fantastic, phenomenal school. Is the biggest real life business school because you get to work on so many projects with such impact. But at the same time, to your point, I was trying to align with what I do really care about, food, but also about innovation and how innovation and technology actually should serve sustainable purpose. So that's the reason why I left Nestle and said, okay, I'm gonna try. I know, how do I bring all the things I've learned in working with this company and to start something else. So I guess that was the moment for me of switch, and I started this something else, and that's so interesting because we have this tendency. I don't know if it's a tendency, and my personal, that's my opinion. There's a tendency to think that you have control on your life, that you are setting plans and you stick to your plans. But um, I have to be honest with myself. It's not like that. Is always been a mix of I have kind of an idea what I want to do, but I'm taking turns here and left and right, and then sticking me to other places, and then I have to kind of rationalize. And you have to rationalize this when you have to present yourself as a person, when you present your profile on LinkedIn, etc., which is a difficult work to do. But in reality, I've been more a person that's taking different turns of direction really based on passions, and where in a given moment in time in my life I can do what I have and what I see as a potential. So all to say, I'm mentioning that is when I left Nestle was to start a food company, and we're still working on that. And so the company is called Fooditude, and the whole idea is how do we create a meal delivery system of personalized nutritional meals, so that are good for your health, that is sustainably sourced using regenerative agriculture, and that can be delivered at your house by using recyclable, reusable packaging. So how do you create a circular economy that people can afford? And so that was the main idea. And one of the key components of this, one of the key enabler, is actually leveraging AI, artificial intelligence, because AI can help you understand your consumer behavior in terms of food. So imagine like the Spotify of food. That's the idea on one end, and the more you try something, the more the system learn on one end. So it can really personalize, but it knows also about your lifestyle, about your activity, and everything. So it can really tied something that is nutritional balance for you on one end. And then you use AI on the other end for managing supply and demand. So how do you reduce waste so that you do the most optimized food order of raw products? and because you can start anticipating most likely how much and what kind of product people would eat. So that was the 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 purpose of this. But I wasn't in the field of AI at the time, so I had to actually really understand. Even if I was working back at Nestle with some parts of AI, so I say, how do I get competencies and experiences in that field? So that's where the first step was studied this company chemistry and really trying to have a team that has expertise in AI and try to understand how we innovate with that tool. So that was kind of a first step in the process.
I see. So the AI workshop came out of your own journey of understanding artificial intelligence as a tool to help you build this fooditude business
Yes.
that you're creating. I see. That's really smart. I want to take a step back for a moment, and because what you said about life isn't a straight line. I have a plan, and I go from point A to point B, and let's see what happens at point B. It's never so simple like that. Usually, it's a fractal of choices you got to make.
Yeah.
In the middle of chaos, inner and outer chaos, right? So the question I have for you would be: there's a million other things that you could be doing, including staying at Nestle, right? You decided to come out of it, fooditude, but a million other things that you could be doing. Could you walk us back on maybe some mental models or processes that you did as a way to help you make the best decisions possible holistically for you, for your family, for your community, everyone that depends on you? Any specific mental models that you use as a way to help you make that decision?
I So one of the things I'm doing a lot is talking to a lot of different people, and usually talking to people that are like 10, 15, and 20 years ahead of me in terms of experience. I guess that's something I've been doing a lot, and actually, you know, testing some of those ideas about my life with these people and see how they respond to that and what were their experience. Um, there's there's no check and balances tools that would work. I've done this so many times at the beginning. Like, okay, what's the plus, what's the minus? There's a big component of you have to understand. There's a few things. Is like I have a family. I have 3 kids. We moved from Europe to here, and it was like it's already a big shift in terms of life change. So then when you move away from the security of a very large firm, you need to do a calculated risk definitely, which is a very different situation where if I was 20 years younger. So absolutely, that's the part of the plus and minus you need to take into consideration. How much can you risk on one end? But it's learning. It's for me it's not really mental model, but would be like tactics that I've been using a lot is really trying to learn from others that have been there, because they can tell you, very straightforward what they loved, what their regrets are, what they could have done differently, and that gives you some information about who you might be in like 15, 20 years down the line. So in the case of me leaving Nestle was that it's like, how do I see myself in 10 years? I left Nestle in my mid 40s, a little bit before, and say, and if I stay any longer, I would be defined by me in this company because I've been their company so long. So is there anything else to discover, and is it worth the risk? And so that's the kind of the reflection, and just projecting myself in 10 years after and say, okay, and if I step back and look in the past, what can I tell about myself and that new experience?
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I asked this question specifically because this is a common human challenge, right? It's part of being human is we got to constantly evolve ourselves. We get to constantly evolve ourselves and make new decisions and take a leap of faith such that we can get to the next level of our life, of our career, of our relationships. So thank you for sharing that. I do want to jump into why did you pick sustainability? Going back to that, out of the million other problems that you could be solving.
Um, I guess sustainability is across everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is where, I mean, if it was not a few years ago, um, today is even more important. Um, but sustainability is really how you are balancing the process of putting things out in the world for the benefits of a few and the benefits of a larger group. How you take into consideration the side effect, the cultural effect, the interdependencies of things you put out. So how you really think what you innovate in a very holistic way instead of just on a field where you are good at and working in. So I guess that's a model um, that not only is essential for us to to be able to continue to live in on this planet, but if companies either don't get that, they eventually going to be irrelevant over time because we are in a place of we live in an ecosystem. That's what we do with the other company I have. It's called Collective Future, and where we help organization is to think about future, and possibilities of the future, but really from a place of what we call an ecosystem. We live in an ecosystem. Everything is connected, and so sustainability is another word to actually take into consideration this ecosystem when you think about innovation.
Mm. So the conventional thinking around sustainability is, well, let me actually backtrack for a moment. Typical business in the past has been, let me take advantage of resources that are quote unquote free, and typically is nature and pollution and things like that. So let me take advantage of that, extract as much value out of it, and then turn that free, quote unquote, free resources to monetary, right? And then in my mind, sustainable model takes all of the cost of making the goods,
Yeah,
the ecosystem, and everything in consideration, and such that when you do come up with a solution, it's not at the cost of something else, at the cost of community and so on and so forth.
yeah,
So the question that I have is, so if that's the case, then it would seem to be more expensive, quote unquote, more expensive to incorporate sustainable solutions into a business versus just screw everyone else. I'll just get what I need for now, right? So how do you architect
yeah,
in a capitalist society, in a capitalist system? Does that make sense?
yeah. Absolutely. It's a good question. Is everything you create when you create something, you destroy something. That's when you create something, you extract resources. That's a given. So you cannot avoid the equation. But to your point, how can you reduce the impact or reduce the footprint of extracting something, and potentially how can you re-inject whatever you extracted back into the system? That's where all the engineers and all the people working around sustainability are working on, and there are a lot of solutions there. But going back to your question about how you insert this in a capitalistic model, it's a very good question because um, I don't know to which extent you're familiar with lean methods. And so lean methods is really looking at um, the value chain where you produce and eliminate waste through the value chain. And waste is really around everything in the process that we do. Does it actually create value in this process? If not, it is waste. So it goes to the very tiny elements like wait time is waste. When you wait for decisions to be made and you need to wait for the next meeting for the decision to be made, that's waste because then this project sits there doing nothing. Movement of product. We're trying to make sure that products don't move as less as possible because each time we move, it's actually requiring transport. It's requiring it has an impact on your carbon footprint, for example. So there's very different elements of waste you identify through lean methods. But the reason why I'm mentioning that is because there's a key concept, which is the idea of how you are connecting supply and demand in a very intelligent way and to a high level of connectiveness, and so that you only produce what you need. Okay, and that model, when that model was put in place in Japan through Toyota manufacturing a long while back, like 50, 60 years ago. This is something we've never applied in our industry, especially in the US or in Europe, where we've based all the logic of reducing cost by offshoring, through offshore manufacturing. But this model, what it creates is actually you mainly guess inventory. And the whole capitalistic model, if you look at apparels, for example, is you go with the logic of overproduction. So you overproduce, all right? Then the whole model is that we're going to produce 1,000 units where actually people need 100. And we're going to then price 100 at the real price. But then we have 900 to get rid of. So then we start doing sales and discount and then
That makes sense,
salvage.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the whole model of capitalism model. So it is worth actually overproducing if we can reduce our cost of production, downstream or upstream. Sorry, but so today, for example, I mean, we have a proof today with what's happening with the COVID that this model is not completely turned upside down, because it's creating a model of hyper dependencies between markets. It's showing that this model was only one way of looking at it. But if you look at sustainability and the opportunity of doing local production, which goes back to your questions about cost, it's more expensive? Yes, it is more expensive uh, uh, at first sight to produce locally. But actually, what local production allows you to do is something which is much more tailored to the need. So you can produce at a smaller scale for a specific population without wasting, without creating overproduction. So it's higher margins, higher profitability rather than the other model. So there are ways, there are paths to do that. It's just how you switch the way you look at the economic model.
Yeah, there's so many different angles I can talk about this. I have limited vocabulary to talk about it. I'll do my best. If you look at how do we reduce the cost, monoculture would be the easiest way to do it because economy scale, right? But as you said earlier, that also makes the system very fragile, because if something is wrong with the supply chain, the whole thing breaks. Let's say take the what's the word I'm looking for? The honeybee problem, right? So if the honeybee goes, the whole thing collapses.
Yeah.
So having more localized version of it, essentially you're enriching diversity in the ecosystem, essentially. So you don't have mono, you have diversity of the different players, smaller players, which is good for the ecosystem overall. Yeah. However, where I have challenges about is the price of the individual local system is gonna go up. At the same time, you also have a lower cost, a food item. So now you're essentially, not you, but now the consumer is presented with an option: a $3 bottle of honey, let's say, to a $1 bottle of honey. Most consumers, myself included, are just, would pick like, okay, so honey's makes no difference for me. Let me pay the $1, save the $2. Does that make sense? So you're going against that.
Absolutely.
How do you then raise the awareness or change the purchasing behavior? Even though I know this is the right thing to do, I still buy the $1 honey. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Personally.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. And I'm the same situation. Family to provide. Absolutely. You look twice. You say, why should I spend $9 for this honey versus this
Right, right.
one, which is a
Exactly.
150. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
like 9 times more expensive.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
really good. And so, first of all, I would say, as a major disclaimer, it's a very, very vast and complex problem because
Mhm.
there's so many things that are dependent. We are, for example, if you look at the US, it is an industry that is being um, um, highly is highly dependent on conglomerates around corn production. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then there's incentives and there's systems in place to actually
Mhm.
keep the price of meat down.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of economic dependencies that are created by different forms of lobbying. Uh, there's and lobbying for reasons of how this system was supposed to work, but is based on one key element, which is really hard when it goes back to because it goes back to consumer behavior.
Mhm.
Is it is going with the logic of abundance.
Mhm.
And if you look at the difference between when you are in France, for example, and here, there is there's an expectation of abundance on everything.
Mhm.
That's how you define customer satisfaction. I can have everything I want whenever I want in the largest quantity for the lowest price.
Right.
And food shouldn't be treated that way. Okay,
Interesting.
there's a lot of product that shouldn't be treated that way in general. But if you look at what your body needs, we are overly consuming protein meats, which is the highest,
Mhm.
the most costly protein you can buy.
Mhm.
But we expect abundance of that. We expect eating a pound of meat like every day, a steak on the table. We expect meat on every meal. And so reversing the idea and saying, okay, actually, I'm going to eat red meat, maybe once a week, you know, but I'm going to eat something that is pasture raised, has good quality, that's actually good for my body and good for the planet. It
Mhm.
takes a whole different logic because then if you eat only one piece of meat a week and you divide this by how many times you buy the same piece of meat throughout the week, this is the economy kind of adjusts itself. That's just one aspect. I'm not saying we're going to solve everything because
Mhm.
definitely it's another problem is how we create, food that is affordable for everyone. And that's a mix of um, regionalizations of agriculture. You can do this with having techniques of regenerative agriculture. Yes, there's technology involved. There's a lot of technology today that we should invest in that can help grow and get better product at a lower and lower price. So it's the same thing. So what is the acquisition cost of a new technology, and then how this technology over time helps actually reduce your overall cost. So that's
Mhm.
another aspect when you look at sustainability. We could go for hours, but the thing is, that's why it's so complex. It takes so many different actors. It takes public
Mhm.
institutions, governments, private institution, lobbyists,
Mhm.
consumer pressure to actually change something. But it is there. I mean, we're talking about this in the US, but you look back in Europe, there's so many countries that are so ahead of us here on those topics that are
Mhm.
10, 15 years ahead of us in terms of reducing the footprints and still being able to actually provide food for all categories of population.
Mm. As you were speaking, what comes to mind is something that a service that I wish existed but doesn't. Is, hey, here's my food budget. I want to have high quality stuff maybe once a week. The rest, for me personally, I just want, let's say, food for fuel, for convenience. But at once, I want to have high quality things, and I want to take the time, the effort to think about it too much because I don't care about it personally. I just wanted to basically outsource the recipe, where to get the resources. That's what I want. I don't know about everyone else, but that's what I want personally. Okay.
That's the intent with foodie to a certain extent. It's prepared meals that have high quality. That's the whole idea.
Mhm.
Then learns from your tastes and
Mhm.
from your nutritional need.
That's right.
So that's kind of the growl. So yes,
Yeah.
maybe one day you be my first customer.
So as an entrepreneur, let me switch topic for a moment, right?
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, it's just such a big, very complex problem to solve, you know. And as an entrepreneur, you start small. You have big ambition, of course, but you start small, and then you go, level up that way, or you partner up that way, right? So when you think about how to approach, because your goal is sustainable food for everyone, if I'm kind of reading the line between what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
and you're starting off with the meal prep service, essentially, right?
Yeah.
How did you like decide to chunk it that way, and then how do you plan to parlay up to making a larger and larger impact that way? Does that make sense from an
Yeah.
entrepreneurial point of view?
So if you look at prepared meal today, um, so it's how you divide this into different problems you want to solve. Okay, so you're right. If you start by looking at the entire variation of this, um, it's there's a lot of touch points on it, and the
It's
cost of
impossible, right? For
yeah,
one
cost of
person.
all.
Yeah.
Exactly. The whole idea is us. We've been working on this model to see how can we keep the cost of a prepared meal under $10.
Mm.
Okay, so that's really at the center. That's why it took us, a while to figure out the model. We've been working on this for 2 years now, and been testing this with different people in the sector to really pressure test whether we can actually scale. So there's several elements. There's one aspect which is your supply chain. Okay, so your supply chain, and that's why when you leverage AI over time, it really learns itself on how to optimize products that you want to buy in terms of quantity, but is gonna, which is one element. So not to oversource. Okay, don't buy more than what you need. The second thing is by using AI, it helps you understand also seasonality of a product and plan ahead of time when to buy the products, which is in a phase where it's abundant, so the cost is lower, and then it's readily available for preparing your food. So that's one aspect. So the systems using AI is really something that can help reduce the cost of sourcing and production. Second aspect, which is huge in that field, let's go with the cost, is inventory management, is food waste. If you look at everything being produced today, 60 to 65% of any produce is being wasted on the value chain. So the consumers at the end get 35 products of what's being produced around. The rest get wasted. And one of the element of it, which is perishable products, you create inventory, you store them, at a certain point in time, you need to deal with that, and you just waste that. So it's looking at new ways of food preservation, and that's another. There's a couple of technology we've been looking at. We're going to be working with, which is helping food to be. You can create actually inventory of those food and preserve them on a very long period of time. We're talking about months, and without depleting any, without using any artificial ingredients in it, and by conserving, preserving the nutritional benefits of the product. So that's another aspect if you manage this part. And so after that, there's the idea. The idea is that how you can create a model where on the $10 you can have what you need as to function as a human, to be fulfilled, that is healthy, and then how this model is flexible enough to actually do add-ons on it. So you have an elasticity on the pricing system. So people can afford, is going to buy actually this great protein in addition to this great product, etc. And so they're going to be playing on higher margins because they can afford. And this then actually funnel and finance the fact that we can then keep the $9.99 meals for the ones that cannot afford. So it's a kind of a price elasticity with a solidarity system in it.
I love how so on the consumer side, all they see is $9.99. That's then it tastes good, and it's renewable, and it's per your personalized preference. That's all they see. But just the way you articulate the different ways how you guys are thinking about the technology side of things, I'm already thinking like, holy shit, there's so much happening in the background in terms of waste, in terms of sourcing, in terms of price, in terms of uh, inventory control, everything, and then recipes and personalization. There's so much going on. Very ambitious project, my friend. Awesome. So segue that for a little bit. To artificial intelligence and innovation.
Yeah.
One of the things that entrepreneurs think about, artificial intelligence is such a like a throwaway line. It's, again, for the layman, is like, oh, okay, yeah, I just use artificial intelligence to automatically do things for me. But it's not, because artificial intelligence could be a lot of different things, a lot of different tools, and then each engineer who is pretty savvy in this space is 100 grand, right? Minimally.
Yes.
So,
Oh yeah.
so it's a very expensive resource. And honestly, my understanding of it, it's also not super predictable, because you're solving huge problems. You don't know the solution they come up with is going to be good enough to solve the thing that you wanted to solve. Sometimes you over engineer it, sometimes you under engineer it. It's a lot of unpredictability there. So, saying all of that, when you use technology as a way to help you ramp up or solve or solutions with more sophistication, do you do a ramp up approach? Let me start off with basic technologies like simple spreadsheet to tables to, before I go to an engineer who does artificial intelligence? Or do you just go, I know the problem is super complicated, let me just jump straight to hire an engineer to use artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's a good point. Actually, that's one of the we were last year we were doing those 5 days AI boot camps for engineers, so which is much more in depth. So I was not delivering those training. It's really the CTO who's really has a PhD in artificial intelligence. And one of the things that he's been hammering was always to say, he was asking question, and people, I don't know, jurisdiction, you're familiar with that, but there's a big hype around deep neural network, deep learning. Okay, everyone is talking about this today, and so most organizations, we're gonna go in the field of AI, so we need to use deep learning. And he was always go back to a numbers of key questions and say after that, you don't need that. And so, yes, to your point, actually, we had a few clients that were asking, oh, we want to implement. We have a client in the field of hospitality management. They say, oh, we want to implement like a personalized concierge at scale. And we're going to be using AI, and they're going to be doing all these targeted campaigns for every guest. And so we get back to them and said, we're really using human-centered design and the way we approach to say, okay, who's the guest? What's the problem trying to solve? What is the experience expecting there? And then we're looking at this and say, well, are you actually collecting data? And we're looking at there was huge gaps of the whole process of checking in data was not even there, and say, okay, don't even think about AI, just collect data. And then the second step, we took 6 months where our data scientists was actually just collecting data on Excel files and just doing insight and say, okay, just use that. You don't need any system. And so just collect the data, do your insight, and make decisions out of that. And so it took 6, 7 months. And after that, we said, well, you want to do campaigns, just launch campaigns, test campaigns. Okay, you don't need AI. Just launch campaign and see whether you want to test if the guest enjoys that, is responsive to your idea. And only now that they've collected data, they've tested the model, and say, okay, maybe you can try machine learning and not even deep learning. There's no use of that. There's a cost of it. There's a complexity. Over time we can use machine learning to just optimize. So yeah, to your point, it's step by step that you build. You don't jump on the technology like that. There are those situations where you have a validated complexity from the very beginning, where a technology like image recognition is needed, and then you go with that. But even with this, we really work at a super small scale. We go super nimble. We prototype this, we test, and we see whether that model is actually solving the problem that we want.
Mm. So let's do a little forward looking, right? Because I've been, creeping around your social profiles and everything. And one of the things that you like to talk about is innovation and artificial intelligence. And for me, as a technologist myself, PhD, biomedical engineering, work with tons of innovators, right? To me, technology is a multiplier. It's just a tool that we use to solve
Yeah.
a particular problem. And AI is a very sophisticated tool, and to me, an unpredictable tool, really. So let's do a little forward looking, right? What kind of problems that you can already anticipate the likes of AI to solve in the clients that you will work with, the people that have taken your workshops, that you have already anticipated, oh yeah, you can solve this type of problems. That way, people who are watching this can have more concrete ideas of, oh, I didn't know AI can do this. Oh, I didn't know AI can
Mm-hmm.
do that. Oh, I didn't know I can do this. Versus just a throwaway line, artificial intelligence, a automatic solution to solve everything. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Um, yeah, I can give you a few. Let me think of a few examples
Sure.
where AI.
Non-confidential, of course.
Yes,
Anything,
exactly. That's what I'm
anything,
trying to.
a generalized solution like, oh
Yes.
yeah, you can use AI to do this and that. So,
So a very basic thing that people, when we talk about AI, is doing a customer segmentation. Okay, so customer segmentation in marketing and sales, that's a very immediate benefit by using machine learning because especially on unsupervised learning. So we call unsupervised learning where there's no clear goal, no objective. So you have data, you have an algorithm, and basically the system is going to learn, it's going to find patterns that you as a human wouldn't find. So you have an e-commerce platform, for example, using the data you get there and doing clustering, and then customer segmentation is very helpful. Oh, I didn't realize that these people most likely are doing this and like that. Okay, that's the kind of correlation. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of leveraging AI I can give you is so it's doing personalization, okay, of recommendation. So very straightforward. Think of Spotify, okay. So that's for music, but you can do this also on your e-commerce platform. That's just understanding the behavior of your consumers and generating the content that he needs to see for the purpose of selling your product. That's another very immediate benefit of it. Now you can extrapolate into other fields. We have a client, we're in discussions about crops, okay, using image recognition and to optimize crops and water usage. So that's a wonderful way of leveraging AI. It's how can I use AI to understand how these are things that are burgeoning actually, how much water do they need, where do they need water, and so over time you can optimize your water usage for growing crops. That's,
mm,
you see, very different way of looking at it. But basically, if I were to say that's what we do on the primer, we used to have this primer on site, and now we're going to be doing this online, and they're free to join, by the way.
mhm,
So what we do is we help people understand how to innovate with this. And there's two ways to look at it. Very basically, you say AI can either help you automate some of your repetitive tasks and activities, or help you augment some of your decisions. You know, when you need to take decisions in a complex environment with a lot of data, uh, AI can help. So automation, augmentation. This is really two way to look at it. And that's the reason why when you do this training is to say we try to not go into industry business case like, wow, this is all the things, all the applicability. That's not how we approach this training. We say what we want to teach people is to think how to innovate first, and then whether or not AI can help achieve that. So
oh,
if
interesting.
you
So the way you approach it is AI is an augmentation to decision making rather than kind of like a done for you type of thing. Is that accurate?
Exactly. Yeah. It's most people say, okay, we need to implement AI. Let's figure out where in the organization. And we've seen that, oh, those guys have implemented this way in this organization. Let's do the same thing. This is not, this is, does it bring any value? Maybe. Does it help, be a little bit more performant? Yes. But how do you understand within your organization some of the key processes, activities that define you as as being a strong IP in your organization, and how then, if you identify this, how then does AI help or not, be better at doing this? And so that's the way we are looking at AI. Come from the problem you want to solve first.
So in my mind, AI, again, is a solution to make sense of nonsensical data or too complicated of data sets, right? In my mind, that's the way I think about it. Correct me if I'm wrong. But when it comes to organizational behavior, or let's say a company within a company, most of the knowledge is tacit. It's
Yeah.
inside each other's head. It's oftentimes it's not in an order fashion on a table or in a table somewhere or in tables somewhere in the data stream, right? So that's in my mind the challenge. Or as Elon Musk said, he built Neuralink because the interface between data and the brain, that's the biggest gap, from analog to digital.
Yeah.
So with that said, I know one of your passion is unlocking creativity within individuals and within organizations. What are some of the ways that you have thought about to really help organizations unlock their creativities even more? That makes sense. Big question, but I'm curious to know what you think.
Wow. Yeah. So agree. Going back to what you said about AI, and yes, when is there absolutely, and I would actually add to what you say is that AI um, um, can can really help you with a lot of nonsensical data, as you said. But humans, what they're doing sense making. We sense makers. And that is not, and no technology can do that. That's the very specificity of humans, and that goes back to what you said about creativity. Yeah, it's a good point. When I was at Nestle, I was doing a lot of workshops, and my workshops had always an element to unlock creativity. Even if we were doing strategic planning, I was trying to do a lot of that. One very simple thing you can do, and I've done so many times, and every time people loved it, and actually was setting the scene for the right outcome. Is I can give you an example. Is like one time we're looking. There was a new brand president that came, at Nestle, like appointed for this new division, and he said, "Okay, can you, help me get this thing together to understand where we're going, put a plan together, etc." And the thing we did at the time is I took them out of the office. So I took them basically. It was so it was in the space of confections and snacks, and I took them in doing store visits. And what we did is like I took them to actually pizza and coffee is the name. And then I say, okay, you gonna order coffee, and you actually gonna ask a questions a few customers here, and then we're gonna regroup. And you had those presidents, they were all like VP level, the other ones, and they had like literally order coffee. And I said, what we need to do now is actually not just order the coffee you would do every day, but try to observe everything that's happening and take the consideration that nothing here is given, everything's been designed. And so they had to report back that. And what was so interesting is two things. The first one is we suck in creativity because primarily first we are bad observers. We just walk in the world with no awareness of what's around us, and you can do the most futile things in your life, like going in a grocery store. But just the fact that you stop at some point and just look around what is happening, how people are walking around you, what do they say, how's the light, what's the music in the back, how the product are displayed. It creates so much more awareness of your environment, and that sparks ideas. So that's one thing. And the second thing, which is so great when you do this kind of exercise, is people, those VPs, they never get out of their office. And if they go out to another part of the office or another plant, but take them in a real environment, have them observe the environment and share all together. It creates bonding. So it creates a place of trust between people and exchange. There's a lot happening. And you learn so much from the way another one is observing. Oh, I didn't see these things. How did he see that thing? And so
Anything
there's a
specific, any examples you can share with us where these group of VPs are
yeah.
surprised
So
and delighted about something they never seen before?
yeah, in that case, they were, the whole approach was about we sell product, we never see the consumers because we sell product to the different, supermarkets. Okay, so the way you design brands is around a messaging that's going to go through advertising, is around your packaging, but I stopped there. So I took them to a Nike store. Okay, like one of the flag store here. And when they went through this exercise, they realized how much the brand was actually reflected in the visual environment and then in the way people were actually interacting with you. So in the service, in the language, in the design of the apparels they were wearing. And what I asked them to do is say, okay, now let's go back. Now let's imagine that this brand is actually like a Nike brand is a store. How would you design the store? And they had to actually design this store and design this brand through that experience. And what would that experience be? And so that's one example on how actually when they did that exercise, there was a clear realization that they must go much deeper in understanding, what are the driving values for the brand that they carry, and not just working on a surface of packaging. And I guess the big takeaway there was like no one is dupe of unhonest message
A
or
one
shallow
message?
message. As in French, dishonest message. Like you cannot convey an idea if people will feel whether it is sincere or not.
Mm-mm.
If the message of your communication is sincere or not, and if it's going to be sincere because you really thought through what the value drivers are for this brand. And
Mm.
so that's an example of
Yeah.
sparking creativity.
One of the things that we say a lot on this podcast is people often don't remember what you say or what you do, but they will remember how you make them feel. So I love the fact that you took these VPs to a new environment and you ask them to broaden their awareness and then observe new things happening and also internalize and communicate what they observe. So in my mind, this is a very holistic transformational experience that you share with them. So it's not only insightful, but also it shift the way they how they look at it. And you also ask them to um, create a new experience based
Yeah,
on the new data that they have. So now all of a sudden it's not just insights, intellectual insights, but it's actually embody practice. They just
completely.
create something new. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah, and yeah, I love what you're saying here. It's exactly that. I've always said that we spend our times in meetings, but if you were to visualize a meeting, we're just putting brains around the table, so like little brains. That's what we're asking to bring on the table, but you need to bring the body with it. Okay, there's so much more that it has to be connected with the embodiment of an experience. That's part of what is so needed for unlocking creativity. And we tend to just keep those two things separated. And that's the reason why also, I guess I told you we're doing in those last year in those boot camps, we're working with this actor, storyteller, doing improv classes with engineers.
Oh, nice. That's great.
And where they get there, this 5 days intense boot camp, they're learning everything about AI. It's so intense. They're like 10 hours every day. But during these 10 hours, we have an actor with us. And actually, what's funny is that the actor is actually doing the AI review. And he's basically say, I'm an actor, I have no engineering background, you guys, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to explain to you what is AI. Okay. And the reason I'm doing this is because you need to explain to somebody,
Hmm.
that is not in your field, what is AI. But
Mm-hmm.
then he's doing all this improv exercise. And the reason why we did this improv exercise, because we wanted to teach them presentation skills, connecting with people in a way that they can pass a message. And so instead of putting a PowerPoint and say, let's bring people that works day in, day out with creating empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he built those improv exercises throughout these 5 days. And after 5 days, A, they enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
B, there was so much bond, and it was creating a real relationship of trust between everyone. Because when you go those silly exercise of improv, you need to let go, all your inhibitions, and trust that others will not judge you. And
Mm-hmm.
then through that, they learn storytelling, and building on ideas of others. And that's a good example that I wanted to share with you about how you embody an experience, a learning experience, in a way for me that is much more that stay much more longer than just talking to the brain.
Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, I'm a huge fan of accelerated learning. I'm super curious. Actually, one of the reasons why I started the podcast is such that I can talk to interesting people about interesting things, about blue sky ideas. So
Yeah,
thank you for being a part of this.
my
Um,
pleasure.
what I was gonna say is that accelerated learning comes from, in my mind, not just cerebral understanding of things, but how do you rapidly uh, intake, but also teach and present it quickly. As the more iteration that you do, the better that you'll be able to really internalize the knowledge that you've learned.
Hmm.
So I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, but innovation workshop 5 day, that's a one-time thing, right? How do you help organization to sustain this inspiration throughout, to really catalyze a culture of innovation rather than a one-time
Yeah.
inspiring experience?
Well, that's the $100 million question.
Or more, a billion. Yeah.
A billion, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, So I've worked on large business technology transformation. When I was at Nestle, I did one that was across the US. So LA was the headquarters, but we had like 25,000 employees across the US, and we're shifting strategy, adopting new ways of working, etc. And I was in charge of that. And I can tell you, I had like good success and good failures too. Uh, because I was implementing things by the book, and in some places I could see results. In other places, it was just not sticking up. Basically, if you look at the way people adopt things, you can have the greatest CEO that can do amazing town halls and do the pep talk, and people are behind. They create a sense of urgency. But as soon as there's so much you can do like that from a CEO and ask from a CEO, and at some point in time, things has to go back to businesses where the things start, being, you know, start seeing the reality of who's adopting, who's not adopting that, who's pushing back or not. One thing that I've learned and I've seen been a success, and I've been using this extensively, and that's what we're doing a lot with Collective Future today, which is we call this creating base camps. The idea of creating
Creating
base
what?
camp, base
Base.
camps,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes with the idea of what you said about how do you embed creativity in organization, goes with how much agency you give to people to actually feel that they own um, the stories of this change they implement in the organization, and that they have permission for being creative and coming with new ways of solving problems. So the idea of Basecamp in Nestle, I call that lighthouses, is you create within an office the environment, the existing environment in different places. You create a place, a physical place that embodies the changes, the values that you want to bring. So if it's creativity, if it's adopting design thinking, for example, so
Mm-hmm.
it's a physical environment where when you move into that environment, you are actually in the manifestation of of this new place that the organization needs
Mm,
to be at some point in time. And so you use this place for training, you use this place for coaching, you use this place for making rituals of celebration, recognizing the work of people.
mm,
This is where you bring other, VP from other area to go see the success of this and interact with the people that are engaged with these new forms of, innovation or this new project. And this is then once you have that in place, you actually the people that are working on this change, you empower them to actually run this place, this lighthouse or this base camp. So they become like the evangelist and the influencer of this big list, and they bring organically other and they rally other people to these new ways of working or thinking. And once you have that, then you replicate the same model across the organization. So you create those little lighthouses everywhere. And
mm,
over time, then this is where you shift the rest of the organization. And that's almost through like peer pressure about those lighthouse. But
mm,
that's a
mm,
way of embedding change in the most successful, in my opinion. That's where
mm.
it proved to be the most successful.
So I like that. I can't remember, some sage philosopher said our environment is greater than our willpower. So essentially, what you said, creating these lighthouses, these environment dedicated for innovative thinking as an embodiment, as a manifestation of this ethos of innovation. Love that.
Exactly.
Anything specific around the rituals? So you had said CEOs making a talk, a town hall. That's a ritual, right? Any other rituals that serves, that you've seen, that you have tested, that you've experimented, that serves as a way to really reinforce this innovative ethos?
Yeah. There's several of them, of course. So there's the ritual of how you get this group together and run those meetings. So that's one aspect. And then there's various way to do that. Okay.
Can you give
The
us some
setup.
examples?
Sorry.
Can you give us some examples?
Um, yes, we do. So typically, we're doing a 15-minute stand-up meeting in this space. So people go there in the morning and they just talk about the top priorities that they have. We had an action board, another board. We could visualize some of the problems and who was assigned to. There was no problem solving, so just aligning, and then 5 minutes talking about moods of everyone, like anything. We're doing like smiley faces. There was also this when people get in a room with like a whiteboard and people could just put the face, and we could see globally if the face was like smiley or neutral or like this. So it gives a sense as a team where's the mood. So that's another like a small ritual. And we had like recognitions for every time somebody was solving a problem. So one in the team would actually recognize. There's every time there was a meeting, we had a weekly meeting or so. So every time there's this weekly meeting, we're doing recognitions. And one would say, "Oh, I want to recognize, CK for, having solved this problem and having done that, or etc." So recognition was an important part of rituals.
Mm, mm. Love that.
But to your question, I guess it goes back to creativity. Is you need to every team was creating their own rituals, and that's where I guess when you start getting too rigid and say, okay, as an organization, this is the rituals you need to adopt. And I've seen this in
Mm,
application where we're a
mm,
little bit too rigid and say, oh, this is the rituals you need to go. So you need to go to recognition, to this and that.
mm,
If the recognition is done, but then the heart is not here, then
mm.
it feels superficial, you feel constrained, and you actually create the a counter effect.
Right.
So it's about defining the rituals from what the team is about, and having this team to come with their own rituals is very important. That's
Yeah.
something I've learned.
Yeah.
And coaching the leader to be actually the enabler of those rituals, because that's a very difficult thing, and not the leader to be actually the giver of the rituals.
Yeah. So I used to be in charge of culture in a startup that went
Yeah.
from small team to 200 people. We went from, an idea to hundreds of millions of dollars in valuation, right? So it's an interesting question that we grapple with, right? Do Do we build it like a architect? Like here's a blueprint, here's the framework, here's the drywall, here's the painting. You just do it side by side that way, or do we build it like a garden, like an ecosystem? We help have some frameworks, but things will happen organically. And it's a challenge because if you don't have a structure, then it's very easy to lose it, right?
Yeah,
Whatever magic, it's hard to reinforce it. But if you do it too structured, then it's artificial and it's not authentic.
yeah,
So there's a fine line somewhere. Don't quite have an answer per se, but the way I would invite all of my audience members to really think about is from my personal lesson, it's less about it being an architect. It's more about cultivating, being a gardener, and then cultivating a rich, diverse ecosystem. Would you agree with
absolutely.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally agree with what you're saying, and the difficult tension between having a structure but not being too prescriptive in what you're doing. But actually, there's one element that we tend to underestimate or not even see is that, to your point, you need the garden and you need the gardeners. So in your garden, it's you can create a beautiful garden, okay, with a lot of potential to be used, but who the leader is going to be in this organization, his garden, is so important. So spending the time with coaching and leadership development in the right way with these leaders is so important because they are the one enabling this garden to flourish. And if they're not, and this is just it's a losing battle, and I've seen this many times. So it's understanding how to coach and train and grow those leaders, but also very quickly understanding when those leaders actually will not be the right gardener from the very beginning. And usually we are people have a good sense. If you really understand the types of leadership and management, you know who you should put or not put in these gardens.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about sort of the selection criteria in your mind to choose the right leaders for these type of lighthouses or type of things?
Well, you cannot have a top-down leader. You cannot have a leader that is micromanaging. All those things can be um, you can not reskill, but you can help this leader see how their management style is affecting uh, their environment. But the difficulty you will see the ones that I say this is it's uh, it's hopeless. It's when they have um, strong confirmation that their leadership produce the results. You know, and say, why should I change the way I behave as a leader? Because until today, I've always proved to be right and I've delivered my results. It's very, very difficult. So you need to find usually leaders that are that already have collectively shared the success of a project and they're not branding this under themselves. You have like usually more hope to see people, changing the mindset, being more open to new ways of working, adopting new leadership skills. And that's what I've seen.
I see. So if I'm hearing you right, someone with a growth-oriented mindset, someone who's open to new ideas, and also allow others to share the idea in a psychological safe space. You
Yeah.
didn't say those words, but that's what I hear. Is that accurate?
And that doesn't mean that those that don't have that will not succeed. And it is very important to create conditions for people to see new possibilities. So that's why we're doing those workshops. Like it's a half day for all the leaders. We're going through that, and then we're going to a physical exercise of a method, and then through that they will understand the value. But if after this things don't change, then you cannot know how difficult it's going to be for you to shift their mindset.
Yeah. So I want to actually ask some forward-looking questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So in a time like right now, right? Where everything is challenged from the smallest level on health to the familial level, like, you know, you're both stuck at home, to handling your kids, to handling your own childcare, to companies, the economic system is being disrupted, to city, state, nation, international, like this whole pandemic impacts from the small scale all the way out to the grandest, the largest scale, right? Um, what can, let's see, how do I ask this question? How can, because you and I, we met from a COVID crush syndicate collaboration coming together as a way to really help come up with new solutions to this. So I'm curious to know your point of view as an innovation expert. How do we scale that kind of effort, and how do we improve upon this kind of effort to accelerate more innovations to come to address a global scale level problem?
Well, yeah, but first of all, thank you, CK, for having put together this COVID Crush Syndicate. This is awesome. What is awesome is you have people from very different horizons, and it's exactly go back to unlocking creativity, how you bring very different perspective, point of views, cultures, but also practices all together to try and solve problems. So I guess that's the first step. No, that's 100% right what you did. Now, if you look at the different groups that we've been working on, I'm the group, very naturally on food waste right now. And this is a very good question, because how do you do something where you don't create additional silos? And how do you actually leverage on what others, on the ground are already doing, so you can have a large impact? And that's it's absolutely the key question. Is how are we doing? So in the case of the food waste, how we connect farmers that have excess productions and harvest. In the end, how do we have food banks, shelters, hospitals, all these non-profit organizations that are actually in demand for fresh foods for people and families today, and how connect that? And that's what we're doing. Is like we're focusing on one specific region, but we're looking at this from a place of a system. So we put a system, a platform, and we say, how can we bring technology, processes, and the right actors to do this connection? And we learn from that. We formalize this. We standardize those learnings very quickly. And then this model can be then replicated in another city, another city, another city. I think this is how you can scale. It's not necessarily scale as a nationwide, but how you do this at a prototype level for one specific region. You gather the learnings, and then you open source it to another actor to do the same, because you need people like in Seattle, like in any city, that has the understanding of the ground, of the layout. So we're in LA, I'm in LA. So this is natural, we're doing this here, but then you put the platform at disposals and the processes, and then you ask actors that know their field and do the same. This is how I think we can scale and have an impact today.
Let me do a quick recap. So what I hear you say is, let me solve this local problem, with the specific players in mind, but at the same time, look at it from a operating system, systematic point of view, kind of a thing, right? And then solve it, and then you open source that to other places, such that other cities or states can say, this is interesting. Let me see how I can develop my local solutions for our region specifically. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So the follow-up question would be, have you seen a effective open source solutions that follows similar type of model? And I ask this question because in my mind, open source is an interesting innovation, shall we say, because it goes sort of against the self-interested egoic mind model. Does that make sense? So hence why I haven't actually quite seen a lot of different solutions that work on a systematic level in an effective way. So I'd love to hear if you
Yeah.
have seen effective open source type solutions.
Well, that's a good point. We actually, for the food platform, we're looking at an existing platform because it's called Open Food Network. It's a nonprofit organization, and they've been developing a platform exchange between farmers and farmers market basically. It's open source. It's been crowd developed. Some GitHub. So there's a whole developers from Australia, France, Canada, everywhere is contributing to that platform. So that's the open source on the technical aspect of it. So to your question, I haven't seen an example of what we're doing now, but again, it's very early days. We started a week ago this challenge, so we are going live next week already. So we're going very quickly. We have to move very quickly because the problems of food waste is really happening now. But from the things we've seen, we haven't seen a model. But I guess there must be some sort of model. But I guess to your question, even if you have the platform which is open source, what makes the difference is what do you design this for? And so what is the purpose, how you design it, and what is the process that you put in place that make it very unique? Okay. And so that's what we're trying to get. And what we're trying to get is can we put the most minimal structure in place, remove any intermediaries or any people in this process to allow farmers and those food banks and the last mile volunteers to connect together on this platform and like an exchange platform. So that's what is unique. This hasn't been designed this way, but the architecture allows it to happen. So it's what you design on top of it that makes it different or unique.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Have you talked to Cameron about his Architect for Humanity platform that he built a little while ago?
I've seen him in those meetings all together. Love to connect with him. He's very busy right now because
Yeah,
he's
he's
doing a
launched.
lot on the shelters. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's amazing the work he's doing.
I mean, all of you guys are just creative genius of your own in your own right, where you're just constantly coming up with new ideas, new projects. The reason I mentioned him specifically because he built a open source type innovation platform to allow architects, individual architects, to upload their own design to help local solutions or local tribesmen in remote areas. Right, every tribe have different needs, and it's just interesting. So I can't wait to have him on my podcast to ask him these type of questions in depth. So, my friend, I want to be super respectful of your time. We talked a lot about different things, right? We talked about um, your favorite dish. We talked about teaching me the atomic unit of tasting food to broaden it up to having an emotional relationship with food, to collaborating sustainable food, right? That issue. We talked about um, uh, your specific workshop design, how you design your workshop such that it's a transformative experience for the people who want to learn about artificial intelligence, at the same time learn about many different levels of what it takes to communicate effectively in this topic. What else did we talk about? We talked about your passion for sustainable food and this project, this platform that you're building, right? What else did we talk about? Help me out.
Unlocking creativity, the embodiment of experience.
That's right. That's right. We talked about how do I actually do that on an individual level, as well as on the systemic level, right? The lighthouses within the different organizations, and then picking the right people with the right mindset to do that. So a wide range, a wide spectrum around innovation, artificial intelligence, food. What's one thing, if they can walk away with and act upon your recommendation, that you'll ask them to do from this conversation?
One recommendation is in the current situation. So with what is happening right now, where we are moving, navigating in terms of complete uncertainties, and if you're working in a business, there's one thing I would say is it's the time to surround yourself with people that have diverse backgrounds, like completely different from your business, get them together and try and exercise to ask, to try to identify the questions to ask about this business. That would be for me the most effective, interesting way to start for navigating the unknown, because you need very different new perspective, because everything is now different.
Hmm. Let me add on top of what you just said. In these type of conversations, one of the topics I love to ask the people in the group is called DOS: danger, opportunity, and strength. And why we want to talk about it, because other people may be able to see the danger that you don't see, the opportunities that you don't see, or the strength that you have that you may not see. So
Yes, very
having
good. Yeah.
a conversation around this would be very, very useful, conductive for a mutually productive conversation. So with that said, my friend, people who are inspired by your story, by the way you think, by the way you articulate, by the passion that you have, by your French background, where should they find you and follow you?
They can find me on LinkedIn like everyone else, and they can message me. I'm responding. I'm there. So that's the easiest way to connect with me.
Thank you, my friend, for opening your heart, opening your mind, opening this very wide range of conversations that we have today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, CK, for having me. It was a very humbling experience.
Wonderful. Me stop.